It has always seemed a matter of time, not if, but when. Tommy Tuberville's blockade on military promotions would have a real-world effect on U.S. national security. That moment is upon us. It's right now. After the commandant of the Marine Corps suffered a medical emergency on Sunday, serious enough to warrant a stay at the hospital, Senate Armed Services Chair Jack Reed told Politico this, quote, "One of the reasons, I think, that contributed to his condition was he was doing two jobs at once. I read where he was working from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. As a result, if he had, as is normal, an assistant, he could switch off." As soon as today, at Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's direction, the Senate could vote to confirm the Marine Corps' second-ranking officer, along with President Joe Biden's picks to lead the Air Force and the Navy. Joining me at the table, the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America and the host of the Independent Americans podcast. Our friend Paul Rieckhoff is back and out of the Capitol for us. My friend and colleague, NBC News correspondent Ali Vitale. Ali, first on this real tragic consequence of what I know is politics as usual behind you. What is Schumer going to do? Is he going to hold them there until they have these individuals confirmed?
Well, at least for these three that we saw him file cloture on yesterday, Nicole, yes, we expect to see that vote happen potentially today, more likely sometime Thursday. But there is a larger conversation happening because these three nominees, yes, they plug the dam, the leak in the dam, so to speak, in terms of the present crisis that's immediately in front of the Marine Corps right now. But it's nothing to say of the hundreds of other military promotions that are still being held up and have been held up since this blockade earlier in the year. This has been going on now for months. The open question, though, is whether or not there are enough Republicans who can come together with Democrats to change the rules, whether extremely specifically, just so that they can get through this period of time and this batch of nominees, or if there's a larger conversation happening to get Tuberville to get rid of the hold that he has placed on this. I am not of the mindset that he is going to do that. I mean, he's been very clear about the fact that he's not going to lift these holds until he sees the Pentagon change its policy on supporting abortion access for those who don't decide where they're stationed, but might end up in a state that abortions are heavily restricted, and so they would have to travel outside of state. This basically covers those travel and logistics costs. But at the same time, with that policy not shifting, I think a lot of us have just been wondering, is there an off-ramp for Senator Tuberville? Because at each point, even his own leadership, even Senator Mitch McConnell, who reiterated this yesterday, he did not think that this blockade was a good idea. And he has been open about saying that to reporters and certainly within his own Republican ranks. The question is, do they do some kind of a rule change that's targeted and specific that allows them to go through all of these nominees that are backed up en masse? Because the problem is, and you and I have talked about this before, you can't just go through and say, all right, let's just sit in a room for an hour and we'll just vote yay, nay on each of these nominations. That is not how this works. This would take weeks, and that's weeks that the Senate doesn't have.
I would argue that they could make the time, but maybe I've seen Dave too many times. Let me put up General Smith's, in his own words, about the consequences of doing two jobs at once.
The workload remains the same. There's still the two full-time jobs filled by one person. So that hasn't changed. I mean, I've moved houses, but I am still doing both of those jobs and using my staff as best I can to fill in where the assistant commandant would normally be full-time, because I simply can't be in two places at once.
So one person doing the jobs of two, not minor or unimportant people at once, but two vitally important positions at once.
All the chickens are coming home to roost. The things we've been talking about for months together, Nicole, are now coming to fruition in a worst-case scenario where we've got troops in conflict, right? The Commandant of the Marine Corps has been run into the ground. That's what's happening.
Literally.
Literally. Like, right, imagine if you had to host two shows every day and your family had to endure that. That's what these folks have to
But I guess the difference is no one lives or dies if I have to hold Two shows at once.
100%. But the workload and the stress and the impact on your family. I ask everybody watching to imagine doing two jobs with the highest stakes possible at a time when Marines are also at embassies around the globe. When we had 37 attacks and counting on U.S. troops in Syria and in Iraq. And we've got 300 more headed to the Middle East now. So this is happening at a time when Putin is grateful. Hamas loves this. Tuberville is doing the work of our enemies. He's undermining our national security, and he's not backing down. So an off-ramp is unlikely. What the Democrats and Republicans, I hope, can do is figure out a way to run him over. He's a political extremist. He's kind of like a political suicide bomber. You can't negotiate with a terrorist. He's not going to back down. The question is, what do the Democrats, and I hope the Republicans too, do to steamroll him? Because he's not going to move.
Ali, is there any opportunity for Mitch McConnell to say, hey, in the wake of a terrorist attack in Israel, let's table your little personal mission for a minute?
There is always that opportunity. There's always an opportunity for senators to take a stand on anything, Nicole. I just think that the way that McConnell has been able to hold on to power within his caucus for so long is A, knowing where everyone stands, and B, being able to toe the line without upsetting any of his members too much. I think what Tuberville has been able to do on this is he has been able to hold the line as the one senator who can be at the center of it, but there are certainly a handful of other senators around him who support what he is doing, but more than that, don't want to be on the side of voting against what he is doing. And I think that that's a really important point here, because many Republican senators have been outspoken, McConnell included, about the fact that they don't think that this is a good idea, that this is not the most effective way to register a complaint or try to change the Pentagon's policy. But they also don't want to be put in a politically sticky position where they end up siding with Democrats and basically saying that they are tacitly okay with what the Pentagon is doing. I mean, abortion politics are very much wrapped up in this conversation, even though they seem like they are disparate things, national security and reproductive rights access. All of these things are together swirling in the same pot here, and it's part of what makes this such an intractable and sticky and thorny issue. But yes, McConnell has been clear. He doesn't like this. He doesn't think it's a good idea. That doesn't mean that Tuberville's going to change his mind, and clearly he hasn't.
I mean, the politics is interesting. I have to sneak in a break, but I want to press both of you on this. I mean, on abortion, he's in the super minority agree with him. And on jeopardizing and playing politics with combat readiness, which is where this is now. I don't even know if there's 10% of the public that supports that. We'll press on that open door that Ali just opened for us in just a second. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. We're back with Paul and Ali. Paul, Ali went to the politics of this. I mean, I would argue that nationally the politics are hideous for Republicans to be associated with someone who's against active duty military having the same access to health care that they would have if they were stationed abroad.
Yeah, I mean, this should be a political opportunity for the Democrats to tee off on this guy. He should be the poster child for everything that's wrong with the other side. I mean, you're right. He is in an extreme minority in the Senate. It's him, it's J.D. Vance, and it's Mike Lee. It's the same extreme 5 or 10. I think he had 11 that voted with him last time that are always doing this. Biden should make an example of it. Do a countdown. Put him up on a billboard. I mean, Tuberville is right now in a time of war undermining our military and hurting senior military leadership in a way that's so obvious that I think it's a winner politically, frankly. And I'm an independent. We talk about this a lot. This is exactly the kind of issue that forces people to leave the Republican Party, to become independents, to go to the other side. I think it's a winning issue for the Democrats. It's terrible that it's happening, but I'm surprised they haven't ratcheted it up because it's so important right now. I
mean, and that's the abortion politics. The military politics are even clearer. Yeah. Nobody is for damaging U.S. combat readiness.
No.
Except Tommy Tuberville.
Except for Tommy Tuberville, who hasn't served in uniform himself. He thinks that football fields are like battlefields. We've seen Senator Kelly ramp it up. We've seen Senator Warren. Now it's Jack Reed, who's a West Point grad. That's the right political strategy, but you've also got to find a way to stop him. They can't just whine on cable television. They got to find a way to neutralize this guy because it's costing our readiness. I mean, this is bad for morale. I mean, it's bad for our international standing. We look ridiculous, and the stakes could get higher by the minute. By the time you finish the show, more American troops could be under fire, including Marines, who don't now have a commandant because of this guy.
Ali, is there a line of communication from the Pentagon's Legislative Affairs Office to the Senate? I mean, what do they want?
Look, you've got to imagine there is, especially as you have people like Lloyd Austin who have been outspoken about the fact that they think that this military hold continues to endanger national security. No one has been secret about this within the Biden administration or here on Capitol Hill. So, of course, these conversations are always happening. I will say, just in the last few minutes, as you guys were talking at the table, our Capitol Hill team was doing some reporting on the Senate side of this building, from opposite from where I am. And it does seem like tonight we might be seeing a support from within Republican ranks to lift a number of these holds and hold votes on them. It could be a few dozen of these nominations. It could be more. I'm not sure of the exact number, but at least one Republican senator confirming to our team on the record here that at some point in the next few hours, they will go to the Senate floor, a group of Republicans, and effectively say that they are standing with Democrats to help end this blockade on a certain number of nominations or promotions that have been held up by Senator Tuberville. It's very notable. Republicans tend to be very reluctant to rules changes. It's a place that functions really here in the Senate on capital P precedent. And so certainly there is a lot of reluctance in changing the rules here. But at the same time, there is a fever pitch of frustration coming. I think that it's so right to put it, as your guest did earlier, that the chickens are coming home to roost now, because these are the concerns that have been warned about from a national security and military readiness perspective since February, when these holds were first announced by the Alabama senator. The fact now that there's added urgency, not just on the front of health issues within the head of the Marine Corps, but also with the ongoing situation in Israel, between Israel and Hamas, all of this lends to the urgency that we're seeing now. And I think it's important to note that Republicans, at least a small group of them tonight, may be willing to say, all right, we've had enough. We've said that we're unhappy with this, but now we're actually going to do something about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the ultimate cover for them isn't standing with Democrats, but standing with the military, which
absolutely.
I'm old enough to remember when that was all the cover you needed. Paul Rieckhoff, Ali Vitale, thank you both so much for helping us get on the record with this really important story. We'll stay on it.